One of the biggest puzzles we see in the business world is this. Why do really smart, passionate business owners so often ignore the gold mine of data their customers are giving them for free every single day? It's a fascinating question. So today, we're going to put on our lab coats and diagnose a very, very common condition we call data blindness. So let's frame it like this. Think about a company like Spotify. They see every click, every pause, every skip as vital information, as oxygen. They're processing like 600 billion of these signals a month just to guess your next favorite song. Now, your business, it's generating signals that are just as rich, but for some reason, they often get treated like junk mail, unopened, unread, and tossed in the trash. So the big question we're tackling is why? Why does this happen? All right, let's get into the diagnosis. And look, we're going to approach this like a doctor, not a judge. This isn't about blaming anyone. Data blindness is a cognitive condition. It's a human thing. And like with anything else, the first step is just recognizing the symptoms in yourself. So does any of this sound uncomfortably familiar? Like you've got a potential customer who's practically screaming their interest. They've hit your pricing page 11 times, but your sales team is out there cold calling random strangers. Or maybe you can rattle off last month's revenue to the penny, but if I ask you why sales dropped, you kind of just shrug. These aren't signs you're bad at your job. They're classic textbook symptoms of a cognitive trap we all fall into. And listen, if you're nodding along or maybe wincing a little bit, this is the most important thing you're going to hear today. This has nothing to do with being lazy or not being smart enough. It has everything to do with being human. Your brain is literally hardwired with mental shortcuts that make ignoring this stuff feel easier and even more rational in the moment. Okay, so we've seen the symptoms. Now let's pop the hood and look at the engine. We've got to understand the root cause, these hidden biases in our brain's operating system that are actually driving the whole thing. Because once you understand the why, you can start to change the what. It all kind of starts with an old joke. You've probably heard it. There's a guy on his hands and knees under a streetlight. A police officer comes up and asks him what he's doing. He says, "I'm looking for my keys." The officer asks, "Is this where you lost them?" And the guy says, "Nope, I lost them in the park, but this is where the light is." As funny as that is, it perfectly describes a powerful cognitive bias that psychologists call the streetlight effect. It just means our brains are wired for efficiency, so we naturally look for answers where it's easiest to look, not necessarily where the real answers are hiding. And here's exactly how that plays out in a business. Looking at total website visits, that's easy. That's right there under the streetlight. But figuring out why one person visited 5 times and then just disappeared, oof, that's over there in the dark part of the park. It takes more work, so our brain just naturally avoids it and sticks with the easy, shiny numbers. Okay, now think about this. A customer cancels their subscription. What's the very first thought that pops into your head? Is it something like, they probably couldn't afford it anymore, or our competitor must have offered them a deal? We do it automatically, right? We just tell ourselves a story. And that impulse right there, that's our second culprit, the narrative fallacy. Our brains are absolute storytelling machines. They crave a simple, clean story that makes sense, much more than they like messy, complicated data. That quick story, "Oh, the economy's tough," feels so much better than digging through the data to find that actually churn spiked right after you changed the checkout process. And that brings us to the last piece of this puzzle. Take a look at this number, 72%. That's the percentage of business owners who say they have too much data. Now, that's not a resource problem, right? That's a cognitive overload problem, and that overload has a very predictable effect on our brains. It creates this massive paradox where we feel like we're drowning in data, but we're absolutely starving for real insight. See, when our brains get overwhelmed with information, they don't get smarter, they get tired. It's called decision fatigue, and when that happens, we just shut down and default to our gut feeling, which, let's be honest, is usually just a polite way of saying we're guessing. So, what's the big deal? Well, this isn't just some interesting psychological quirk. It has real hard costs. Let's make this tangible and look at the actual high price of all this guessing. When you see the numbers, it's pretty staggering. Studies show that just a tiny 5% increase in customer retention, something you can get just by listening to those early warning signals, can boost your profits anywhere from 25% to, get this, 95%. The return on just paying attention is absolutely massive. Or how about this? When you send out marketing based on what a customer actually does, instead of just blasting everyone with the same message, your transaction rates can be 6 times higher. 6. That's the difference between having a quiet, personal conversation with someone and just shouting into a hurricane and hoping someone hears you. Let's bring this to life with a story we'll call The Slow Bleed of Sarah. Month 1, her order is late. That's a whisper, a tiny signal. Month 2, she doesn't reorder like she usually does. Another whisper. By months 3 and 4, she stopped clicking your emails. The whispers are getting louder. She's telling you something's wrong. But in a data-blind business, nobody hears it. The alarm bells only go off in month 5, when she's already gone for good. And the real cost isn't just losing Sarah. It's losing the next Sarah, and the one after that, to the exact same preventable pattern. Okay, that's the diagnosis. It can feel a little heavy, I know, but here's the good news. This is 100% treatable. And the cure isn't some fancy, expensive software. It's a cognitive shift. It's about fundamentally moving your way of thinking from a place of guessing to a place of knowing. And this is what that shift looks like. On one side, you've got the data-blind mindset, where all those customer signals just sound like static, like noise. On the other, the data-informed mindset, where those exact same signals become a conversation. You stop just reacting to fires and you start looking for the smoke. And maybe most importantly, you graduate from just asking what happened to asking the much, much more powerful question, why did it happen? So how do you actually do that? Well, the antidote to all those trickly brain biases isn't some complex algorithm. It's actually a really simple, repeatable process. You just observe a pattern, you make an educated guess, a hypothesis about what it means, then you test it with one small change. You measure what happens, you learn if your guess was right or wrong, and then you repeat it. That's it. That's how you override your brain's love for easy stories and turn your business into a learning machine. And to make it super practical, here are 3 things you can literally start doing this week. First, just change your mindset. Every customer action is a message, so stop judging it and start getting curious about it. Second, organize your customers by what they do, not just who they are. Their behavior is the most honest thing they'll ever tell you. And finally, just build the habit. Make just one decision this week that's based on data, not your gut. That's how you build up the cognitive muscle to really start listening. Because in the end, that's what this all boils down to. This isn't a data problem. It's not a tech problem. It is, pure and simple, a listening problem. Your customers, through every single action they take, are telling you everything you need to know to succeed. You just have to pay attention.